Hello and welcome to this podcast. The podcast will be about Deep Work, book by Carl Newport. Now, this book is very fascinating and it has inspired many people. Carl Newport has made this book into two parts. The first part explains the idea of deep work, while the second part suggests strategies that help adopt this deep work behavior. So let's start. Part 1, the idea. The first chapter is deep work is valuable. With the rise of digital technology, the labor market have changed dramatically. In their book Race Against the Machine, Eric Bryce-Jolfson and Andrew McAfee say that we live in an era of great restructuring, a time when technologies are advancing at high speed while the skills of ordinary workers fall behind. This creates a gap between human and technological resources, and it means employers will more likely hire smart machines than people. The good news is that while many people risk being thrown out of their new economic reality, there are still groups of workers who have a potential to win. These are the high-skilled workers. These are workers who are able to work with complex machines and get valuable results. A great example of a worker is Nate Silver, an American statistician who analyzes data and makes forecasts using the STATA system, a tool that requires a lot of learning. For people like him, machines are not obstacle, but rather means that help achieve goal. The superstars. Emails and virtual meeting software make it impossible to hire the best workers instead of people who are available because they live next to your office. For example, if you need a programmer, you can hire David Hansen, one of the best in the world, and the fact that he on a different continent would not mean anything to your company. But as Newport pointed out, this would definitely mean something to less skilled programmers who lived right in your area. Now, the owner. The great restructuring is a good time to have capital. According to bargaining theory, there is money. When money is made through capital investment and labor, the reward and proportional to the input. So the reward are proportional to the input. Okay, so whatever input you put, you get that much monetary reward. Digital technologies reduce the need for human labor, so the importance of investment into intelligent machine increases. As Newport says, there is no secret easy way to generate large amount of capital. However, the other two categories are relatively accessible. You have to know how to work creatively with new machines and how to be better in your field. This way, it determines two abilities needed to thrive in the economy. The ability to quickly master hard things. Technologies change rapidly. So not only will you have to do hard things, you will have to constantly learn and do it quickly again and again. Second, the ability to produce elite level mastering skills is not sufficient. You need to actually produce those things. Newport explains that these two abilities are impossible to develop without deep work, and that this is a serious reason to start practicing it. How does one cultivate these core abilities? It's here that we arrive at a central thesis of this book. The two core abilities just described depend on just ability to perform this deep work. If you haven't mastered this foundational skill, you'll struggle to learn hard things or produce at an elite level. Moving on to chapter 2. Deep work is rare. In recent years, curious trends in the business sphere have appeared. The first trend is the open office concept. This policy was adopted by Facebook as well as many other Silicon Valley companies. By having people work in a common space, leaders hoped that they could learn from each other. The second trend is instant messaging. It has nothing to do with chatting. It's a goal to raise productivity and save customers' time. Finally, the third trend is maintaining a social media presence. For example, New York Times encourages its editors, photographers, and writers to maintain a Twitter account. These three trends are very paradoxical, says Newport. Open space, instant messages, and social media presence do not promote deep work. But as we see from chapter 1, deep work is exactly what helps individuals work effectively. Yet organizations do not support it. What they support is a culture of connectivity. But why is this so? The reason, in Newport's opinion, is the principle of least resistance, which is acting in the way that is easiest at the moment, being connected with our colleagues. We can easily get answers to numerous questions by sending a message or simply talking to a person sitting next to you. Besides, connectivity can help organize your time. Think about meetings. They can force you to take actions, not having to manage your obligations by yourself. However, there is the other side of the coin. There is another reason why people tend to avoid deep work: the absence of indicators of productive work. Job ambiguity, which often accompanies knowledge workers, leads to making an impression of being busy. As Newport explained, people turn to the mindset of industrial age, when productivity could be physically seen and measured. In the reality of modern knowledge workers, this takes the form of sending and answering emails, scheduling meetings, and doing other visible things. But of course, this doesn't help you achieve deep work. Finally, deep work is seriously hindered by the cult of internet. It is based on quality and mastery, and this is often non-technical and even old-fashioned. As we can see, there is nothing substantial about distracting behaviors and nothing flawed about deep work. Appreciating this helps you realize that you can and should enhance your deep work ability, says the author. Chapter 3: Deep Work is Meaningful. In the chapter, Newport discusses deep work from the viewpoint of three arguments: neurological, physiological, and philosophical. A neurological argument for depth. Going through a serious life drama as she was diagnosed with cancer, science writer Winifred Gallagher discovered an interesting connection between attention and happiness. Instead of focusing on suffering and pain, she decided to focus on movies, walks, and 6:30 martini. Noticed that this worked better than she could think. This period of life expected to be dark appeared to be quite pleasant. Management of attention worked a miracle. Our problem, says Newport, is the assumption that circumstances always determine how we feel. However, our worldview is constructed by our brain. This means that we can choose what to do and what to concentrate on. It applies to work as well as even more, says the author. A workday driven by a shallow from a neurological perspective is likely to be a draining and upsetting day, even if most of the shallow things that capture your attention seem harmless or fun. A psychological argument for depth. Most people erroneously assume that happiness comes from relaxation. This is not true. Free time is unstructured and it can be hard to organize it and actually do something you enjoy. Work, on the contrary, can give you mental pleasure. Goals, challenges, and roles encourage you get really involved and feel a sense of accomplishment. In other words, Work creates a state of flow. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist who first defined this idea, describes flow as a state when a person's body or mind is stretched to its limit in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. And a state of flow definitely falls into the category of deep work. A philosophical argument for that. Descartes' skepticism, which ushered in the Age of Enlightenment, was based on the belief that individuals seeking the truth surpass God or the king. People had to identify what's meaningful and what's not, which caused a lack of order and sacredness. Dreyfus and Kelly, the authors of All Things Shiny, explain that there is still a way to reopen the lost sacredness. The thing is, you should not try to find a meaning outside of individuals or things, but rather accept that the meaning is already there. It's their intrinsic part. For example, a wheelwright shouldn't decide which part of the wood is valuable. He should know that the wood is valuable by itself. Cultivating an appreciation for what you do uncovers the meaning, and extracting the meaning is what deep work is about. Part 2, the rules. Rule number 1. Now these rules are very important in this book because these rules basically gives solutions for the problems faced for a person who is undergoing or who is trying to deep work. Rule number 1, work deeply. To integrate deep work into your professional life, you can choose a way that suits you best. Says Newport, scheduling deep work, you can pick one of the following approaches, which calls philosophies. The monastic philosophy of deep work scheduling. This approach is about getting rid of or drastically minimizing things that can be considered shallow. For example, a science fiction writer, Neil Stephenson, doesn't provide his email address on his website page. He explains that this way he makes it clear he doesn't want to be disturbed. He understands that answering many mails can result in low quality of his book and to a much slower pace of his book. The bimodal philosophy of deep work. Carl Jung, who we looked at earlier, did not totally eliminate distractions. What he did was eliminate them only to the period he spent at his retreat. The bimodal philosophy consists of dividing your time and dedicating one part of your deep thoughts and other one to everything else, including shallow activities. What is important in this approach, says Newport, is the amount of time you devote for deep work. It must be at least one full day. A couple of hours in the morning doesn't count. Unfortunately, many people lack flexibility at work to afford these deep work time periods. However, when you clearly determine the time frames and let people know about your desire to work deeply, they will probably respect your decision. The rhythmic philosophy of deep work scheduling. If you constantly do deep work sessions, you will transform them into habits. This ways you won't have to make an effort if and when you want to go deep. Here Newport tells a story about the comic Jerry Seinfeld, who described his secret of being brilliant at his work. Every day he writes a joke and every day he crosses out the date on the calendar. So in a few days he can see a chain of crosses. The chain growing creates a rhythmic routine and works as a great motivation. The journalistic philosophy of deep work scheduling. The journalistic philosophy is about being able to quickly switch from deep work to shallow work mode. This ability does not come naturally but can be practiced. So how does this approach work? Walter Isaacson, who was called one of the best magazine journalists in America, worked like this. He could enjoy the company of his family, then go upstairs for some 20 minutes, then come back. At times he wasn't busy. He was able to switch to deep work mode. This way, he wrote a 900-page book aside from his articles. You must be careful to choose a philosophy that fits your specific circumstances. As a mismatch, you can be derailed your deep work habit before it has a chance to solidify. It's therefore worth taking the time to find an approach that makes sense for you. Moving on to rule number 2, embrace the boredom. To achieve the deepest level of concentration, says Newport, one must spend the rest of the time in boredom. When Newport says boredom, he means a state when a person is literally bored, when his brain is relaxing from hard work. But what do we usually do when we feel bored? We go at online. Meanwhile, switching attention using different apps or browsing the net has a very negative impact on our brain. People who multitask all the time can't filter out irrelevancy. They can't manage a working memory. They are chronically distracted. Yes, true. They initiate much larger parts of their brain that are irrelevant to the task at hand. They are pretty much mental wrecks. So if every time you get bored you grab your smartphone, you develop a habit to get distracted. While in opposite to deep work, to fight this, Newport suggests the following strategies. Don't take breaks from distraction. Instead, take breaks from focus. There is a popular technique called internet Sabbath. You pick a day of the week when you are not allowed to use network technology. This technique is not just the most powerful one. If you eat junk food all week except Friday, will it really save your health? Definitely not. Instead, Newport proposes the opposite approach, scheduling a break from focus to give in to distractions. Avoid the internet during the time you are supposed to focus. This applies not only to work hours but also when you are at home. This way you can teach your brain to resist distracting stimuli. Work like Teddy Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt had an amazing era of interests: dance lessons, bodybuilding, poetry reading, boxing and so on. And yet he was not falling behind his classmates. His biographer Edmund Morris says that this can be explained by how he approached his schoolwork, dedicating 8 hours to it and excluding time for classes, training and lunch. He studied intensely the rest of the time, reading quickly and paying maximum attention. This would let him spend the rest of his time on other activities. Meditate productively. We all have time periods when we are not occupied mentally but are occupied physically. For example, while walking to work or driving. As Newport says, we can use this time for productive meditation, thinking about a problem that is most pressing at the moment. This allows you to actually use the time that would otherwise be wasted. Rule number 3, quit social media. In 2013, Newport wrote an article where he explained why he never joined Facebook, and even though the article was never meant to be accusatory, he received some interesting feedback from readers who were trying to defend their choice to be active users. For example, one person said Facebook was a source of entertainment, but was she suffering from lack of entertainment before she joined it? Asked the author. Analyzing the comments he received, Newport came to the conclusion that the benefit people mentioned were minor and random. To describe this way of thinking, he uses the term any benefit approach to network tool. People justify using a tool if they can find any benefit it gives, as opposed to it. There is the craftsman approach to tool selection. Identify the factor that positively impact your professional and personal life, and it's the craftsman approach, says Newport, that really matters. So he suggests 3 strategies to abandon the any benefit of approach and adopt the craftsman one. Apply the law of the vital few to your internet habit. According to law of vital few, 80% of given effect is due to 20% of possible causes. Speaking about it in the context of internet habit, try to analyze if the internet tool you use supports the most necessary activities you have to do to achieve your goals. In other words, if you use the tool while doing the 20% of activities that make a difference, quit social media is a good suggestion that you can take. Newport suggests trying this strategy. Quit social media services you use for 30 days, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. After 30 days passed, ask yourself, have these 30 days been better? Has anyone noticed that I have been missing? If the answer are yes or no, respectively, stop using the services completely. Don't use the internet to entertain yourself. With the rise of internet and the low browsing attention economy, it supports the average 40-hour-a-week employee has seen the quality of his or her leisure time remain degraded, consisting primarily of blur of distracted clicks on the least common denominator, digital entertainment. How do we use our time outside of work? Probably on our phones, scrolling thoughtlessly. But Newport insists that we can and should make deliberate use of our free time. It is important to plan our evenings and weekends in advance so that we don't get confused later. This can include hobbies or things that can help us achieve our goals in the long run. Rule number 4, drain the shallows. Deep work is exhausting and your cognitive capability is not limitless. Unfortunately, even though the value of deep work definitely overweights the value of shallow work, you cannot devote all your time exclusively to it. For an average person, an hour a day is enough. For a person who permanently practices deep work, it can be extended up to 4 hours. Yet shallow activities like meeting, phone calls and other events you cannot really control can consume much more time than expected, and others won't leave you a chance to focus. These time drains, as Newport calls them, are pretty dangerous, so he suggests some strategies to tame shallow works that cannot be avoided. Although, schedule every minute of your day. Planning is a very useful habit that helps you stay focused. So plan your workday and do it in advance. At the beginning of each workday, divide your workday into blocks. These assign activities to them. Of course, something will probably not go as planned. You may wrongly estimate the time needed for a particular activity, or maybe sometimes will appear out of blue. Don't worry, you can always revise your schedule. Planning your workday in such a detailed manner seems restrictive. However, the idea behind it is not about limiting yourself, it's about concentration, quality, and qualify the depth of every activity. Analyzing how deep you have to go doing a particular activity. Ask yourself this question: how much time will a graduate student without a special training need to do it? For example, if you need to edit an academic paper, You will have to know the subject as well as how to work with the academic literature, proper citation and so on. A student who doesn't have the knowledge like this will need a lot of time to get the task done. This can definitely count as deep work. Finish your work by 5:30. That's simple. Okay? Don't work after your workday is finished. It can seem that this strategy will make you miss deadlines, but not necessarily. If you know that your time is limited, you use it more productively. Treat shallow work with suspicion because its damages are often vastly underestimated and its importance vastly overestimated. This type of work is inevitable, but you must keep it confined to a point where it does not impair your abilities to take full advantage of deeper effort that ultimately determine your impact. Deep work is much more powerful instrument than most people can imagine. It's not for everybody though. To learn the skill, you will have to change habits and use your willpower, and to many of us this sounds uncomfortable, but if you do choose to make deep work a part of your life, you won't have many competitors, and without a doubt you will be rewarded. With this, we come to the end of the podcast on the book Deep Work by Newport. Hope you like this video. Share it with your friends and subscribe to this YouTube channel.